I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by three incredible women in our industry. I have Lee Cowlishaw, who is Consultant Executive Director of the HBAA. She's also Vice Chair of Eventwell, so welcome to Lee. I'm also joined by Susan Arslin, who's the incoming President-elect of MPI UK and Ireland, and is also a psychologist. So we'll be getting some experts' opinions from Susan during the session this afternoon. And last but by no means least, Priya Narain, the amazing Priya, co-founder of Event First Steps, General Manager of Event Marketing Association, and also an Executive Director of ILEA UK. So we've got a fantastic panel with us this afternoon. So just to kind of introduce the session, we all know how turbulent the last 12 months have been for the industry. Okay, no one can really argue with that at all, can they? But what has the last 12 months looked like for our teams and our guys that are heading up our industry associations? So that's associations like MPI, HBA, ILEA, EMA, Event Marketing Association. We're going to be looking at the incredible work that these 4 associations have been doing over the last 12 months to support the industry and the members, how critical this work has been, the work done to lobby Government UK, for example, but also to raise the industry and sector profile, because that's been desperately needed. I think that's been highlighted over the last 12 months in terms of how that's been needed. But also as well how the associations in terms of the support are going to be adapting over the next 12 months as we're coming back and we get ready to restart in June, our roadmap recovery, or whatever name's been given to it now in terms of us coming back and restarting. But also as well, most importantly, is recognising, the mental health emergency and crisis, and putting mental health and wellbeing really at the heart of this support to enable to build resilience for the industry and for our professionals moving forward. So welcome, ladies.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to kind of kick in first of all with our first question. And that was again to highlight, what I'd said about the last 12 months, have been turbulent to say the least, shall we say, no getting away from it. From your members' perspective, then, as associations, in particular, what have been some of the challenges that they've faced, and how, as associations, have you been there to support and help with that? I'm going to go to Lee with that question first.
I think, totally agree with what you're saying in terms of the last 12 months. And straight away, very early on, it was evident that the pandemic was beyond washing hands from a mental health and wellbeing perspective. As an industry, all the great work that Eventwell have done in terms of raising the awareness of mental health, it was on the cusp of, really coming to the forefront. But actually, what the pandemic is put people back. So regardless of the situation that you're in, there are no winners in this, and people's mental health, whether they recognise it or not through their emotional triggers, it will have been impacted. So from an HBA perspective, we were very quick to offer free webinars in terms of mental health and wellbeing in collaboration with Eventwell, providing guidance and support, because ultimately, none of us have in our job descriptions of how to manage a pandemic. None of us know actually the impact that that's going to have on ourselves, but also the people around us. And by providing support, clarity and guidance has helped to signpost people in their needs, and that will continue for some time. This isn't going to go away. We talk about the recovery, but this is here to stay in terms of how we're dealing with it as individuals, as family members, as businesses, as business owners, but as employees as well. And it's going to take time, and we need to make sure that we're providing that guidance and support for our members, but also for ourselves. It's been a relentless time for us all.
It has, yes, and it's exhausting, I think, and tiring for so many, hasn't it? So from Priya, from your perspective for EMA and for ILEA,
okay, so with my EMA hat on, obviously the reason why associations are here is to create that sense of community and that sort of belonging, and nothing has been more important over the past year than that. EMA being an association for corporate planners, a lot of our members have found themselves busier because they're having to do a lot more online stuff, and something that would have been a quick meeting or a quick phone call is now a Zoom meeting or something like that. So in terms of looking after sort of our members in that sense, is from a community point, we've you know, for the past year, we've scrapped membership fees, which we're slowly introducing now. Obviously, people are in different positions within their career, so whether they've, you know, actually working or been made on furlough or been made redundant, obviously money has become a bit of an issue in the past year, especially with you know, cuts to incomes and whatnot. So that's one thing that we've done, and I think Lee mentioned that they've done something quite similar.
Yeah.
And then again, in terms of you know, the point of bringing people together is that we've offered a huge amount of free content. We do weekly events, we've done webinars, you know, and it's all around topics to help people navigate these uncertain times. So that obviously includes mental health and well-being, and, you know, just being able to represent that corporate voice for our members as well. And I think, you know, working with initiatives like Event Well, which we now, I'm pleased to say, we are partners with now. So it's something that it will be a continuous process. Like, yes, we are on that road to recovery, but that doesn't mean mental health is on the road to recovery. You know, people have adapted to working from home, which is, you know, completely new to many people. Working from home plus homeschooling, which again, it's all new. So it's just providing that support and providing content that can, you know, help provide those kind of guidelines as well.
Absolutely. And I like how you both touched on the professional development as well, which is so important for well-being. Yeah, professional development, feeling that you have the knowledge and the tools to be able to do your jobs. That's fundamentally a really important thing that if associations do, as well as you not just provide membership, you're there to provide that kind of career support and career development as well. So Susan, from MPI's perspective, what kind of things have you been supporting with from that requirement from the members?
So we were never more pleased than we'd already set up a community division within the board with a VP and a team of directors already working on community before the pandemic struck. We were never more pleased than we'd taken that step already. But for us and our members, and responding to our members, the main thing that came across for us was the real sense of isolation that people found themselves in through loss of work, through loss of being able to be plugged into their usual networks, even from home working, people on furlough and people who've been made redundant, who found themselves to be very on their own really, and not part of anything anymore. So recognising that real need that people had to need information and need to reach out, we put together a series of tools for our members, one of them being a monthly community meeting where people come and get together for informal chat and networking. We took steps to work with our global foundation, which is MPI Foundation, which is the fundraising arm for MPI. And they've actually supported 15 of the UK and Ireland members to renew their membership and to stay in touch with the association in recognition of the hardship issues that Priya was just talking about. Mm-hmm. We've tried to showcase our members and where we've had work that's been going on, because some people have actually benefited from the change in working practices that the pandemic has delivered. So we've been able to showcase member activity where they've been doing well, to really keep spreading the word that that business is still out there and that success can still be possible when everything feels to be really down and dreary for us. And then another initiative that we took locally from the UK and Ireland chapter is that we became a member of BVEP, which is the Business Visits and Events Partnership, where we were able to get access to really up-to-date information. We get daily bulletins about what's going on in the government changes and where lobbying's taking place, and so that we can share that information with our members as well. So it's really topical and up-to-date and shared through our website platform.
Yeah, perfect. And I like that you mentioned the BVP there. So I'm going to get that question to all three in terms of what that's looked like, because I know that HBAA works with BVP, EMA, I work with BVEP as well. I can get the words out. Work with as well. So what has that looked like for each of you associated in terms of that particular work with BVP and what they've been doing with government, gov.uk? So Lee first.
Yeah. So from our perspective, BVP, it's, as Susan said, it's provided us with guidance that we're able to offer to members. I'm sure the same for all, straight away. So it's obviously the step down to us, then straight into our members. So up to date, and also feeding upwards as well. And I think that's really important, that we have that platform and the ability to feed in questions from our members, but also we collate questions and we also pose questions ourselves. So we've got that funnel and that channel through straight into DCMS from BVP, which is really important for us to be able to showcase to members as the fact that we have that voice in, rather than just being lost in translation, that we're one of, we actually come together. So all of us will come together from that and have that platform to elevate. So I think that's been really valuable. And, you know, members wait for the updates, as Susan was saying, from BVP for us to be able to provide them with the guidance, and also for us to share with non-members. And you know, I think all of us on here will do recognise that whilst we will have members, we potentially will have shared members. This is also about the industry community, and this is about providing people with insights, knowledge, guidance, regardless of what membership you are part of, or if you're not. We need to make sure that we're communicating with people you know, as much as we can and as frequent as we can, regardless of where they support. And I think that's really key for us to get across, is that you know, we need to make sure that we're looking after the whole of the industry as much as we can between ourselves, which we do and we aspire to as well.
Yeah, it's I think it's been nice for the industry as well to see the associations coming together and working together. Would you agree, Priya?
Oh, absolutely. You know, as Susan mentioned as well, like we are also, EMA are also members of the BVEP, and it's a great source of information to be able to feed back to our members. And it's and also, just similarly as Lee mentioned, it also provides us the platform as the voice of the corporate planners to feed back upwards. And you know, we have a roadmap for recovery, but there's always questions, there's always loopholes. But being able to have a body that we can actually go back to, you know, to pose these questions to, you know, DCMS and places like that, to actually provide a little bit of, you know, for our members, a little bit of reassurance that, okay, things are working, you know, we are listening to your questions, we are answering your questions. And I think Lee summed it up really well when she said it shows this massive, you know, unity amongst associations, because although we are in different sectors, we are the events industry. And, you know, this personally for me, that's such a warm feeling, you know, like, you know, as an industry, we've suffered, but as an industry wide, we are working together to overcome these.
Yeah, which I think is a big message, isn't it? And that rising strong message that we wanted to put across today from Event Wellbeing Day. And it's about us recognising that really as an industry, we're stronger together. Absolutely. And rising together for resilience for all of us is the best thing. The next question I wanted to go, and I'm going to direct this question specifically to Susan, because Susan is our qualified and trained psychologist with us today. So I mentioned in the opening about the mental health emergency. I'm sure there's people who are attending this session today and will be watching it back on demand and playback afterwards, who will have heard the expression the mental health emergency. But Susan, just to kind of try and sum it up and give people an idea of what we're talking about, what is a mental health emergency, and why is it emerged from the last kind of 12 months?
Okay, so as a qualified psychotherapist, actually.
Psychotherapist, sorry.
Like a psychologist. So working with clients and noticing the differences that are coming through with the kind of casework, I think to generalise about what's happening out there in the world. The mental health emergency is really something that's kind of really brought into sharp focus the mental health issues that exist usually in the community, but are hidden because as we're going around our daily business, a lot of people are able to face it out and to hide behind a mask of being busy and activity. And I think what's happened with the emergency situation through the pandemic is really that through lockdown, people have not had access to their usual outlets for assisting or to being able to mask where they're having mental health difficulties. And I think the biggest one that no one will be surprised to hear, I think, has arisen through isolation. And lots of our colleagues in the events industry have been used to having colleagues around them. And it may be that they are single person practitioners, so they may be the only events person in a larger company, but at least they would have their other colleagues around them to provide social support. And I think through the lockdown and through the pandemic, people have been really isolated. There's a fear of missing out when you're at home and you're not quite sure what's going on with anyone else. Then there is a real fear factor there. And once you start with fears, then watching the news and hearing what's going on and seeing all the numbers can trigger people's anxieties that before they may have been able to keep in check, whereas now they've got not a lot of, they've not got as much ability to keep those matters in check. One of the things that's really come to light is that as people have been locked down and had to stay in, they're actually being kept around people for whom they might not have needed to spend so much time. And in our industry, I think we do have a gender bias towards women. There are a lot of women in the industry, and the statistics show that young adults, and women in particular, have suffered more mental health issues during the pandemic. And there's been a sharp increase into cases of domestic violence and people really struggling psychologically to be around other people in their home. Of course, we've got issues of people losing their work and their income, and access to services through different outlets being closed down. And people are generally have been forced to make adjustments to operate in the new world, in this transitory period in the new world, as things are unfolding. And I think the biggest thing really is for most people, and has really impacted people who've got mental health issues, is the loss of control that we've all experienced through having access to services reduced or access to different people reduced. That lack of control is one of the biggest human factors, I think, that helps to keep us on the level under normal circumstances. If you can make decisions about your future and your career and how you're going to spend your time, then it's much better for mental well-being. However, the circumstances at the moment have taken a lot of control out of people's hands and have led people to be in quite a lot of despair, which accelerates the fear and just pushes the triggers again, and so it goes round again.
Yeah, so it's almost like a continuous loop for a lot of people that kind of almost find themselves caught and trapped in a situation. I think you touched on it, didn't you, Susan? In fact, that it's experiencing all of those things. It's trauma for a lot of people. A lot of people are experiencing traumas, and we've all read up and we've all listened on regular basis of the impact of trauma, on children, the impact of trauma on young adults, the impact of trauma on people later in life. And when you experience that continual trauma, and it being relentless, I think, was it Lee that said relentless? That word relentless comes up in terms of the negative impacts it can have on mental health and well-being. So I kind of, our theme for today is all about rising strong. So bearing in mind that kind of that mental health emergency that Susan's been talking about there, then should we have a look as each of the associations, and as well with I'm very happy to say that HBAA, EMA and MPI UK and Ireland are partners with Eventwell, and we're going to be working very closely as community partners over the next 12 months in terms of helping to support with mental health, wellbeing, education for members in all of our communities and the wider industry as well. So looking at that then, good mental health and well-being, it's critical for professional and business resilience. Okay, so what measures are each of your associations looking at, as well as that partnership that's in place with Eventwell to support with this, but the measures that are being put in place by associations to kind of ensure not only that your members feel supported, but also that members recognise the importance of mental health and well-being. I think we were chatting at the start, before we started, about how that I'm hearing mixed messages from Eventwell's perspective in terms of there are businesses and professionals and individuals out there in the industry at the moment that are recognising the importance of mental health and well-being now, and it is very high on their agenda. But we still have a long way to go in terms of some businesses, employers and professionals who just don't see it as a priority. So who should I go to first? I'll go to Priya first for this one. In terms of the EMA, what are you guys looking at in terms of?
So as an association, we look after members as opposed to companies. So for us, it's very, and I suppose with all associations, it's member specific and talking about personal development and learning. So for us, we've put well-being high up on our agenda. So we've recently created a diversity, equity and inclusion committee, from which we've identified 5 areas that we want to concentrate on moving forward for this year. And I am pleased to say that well-being is one of them. So it is part of our strategy as an association, not just we look after our members, but also how our members can look after themselves and their teams. We do have a subgroup within our association, which are senior leaders, so they're the heads of departments, people that look after teams, but how we can support them as well. A lot of the content and webinars that we've been producing are, a lot of the discussion comes up about Zoom fatigue and employee engagement and motivating your teams. So working with companies like Eventwell and other sort of wellness providers, these are the kind of issues and things that we want to look at and help our members with, not just in their own learning, but developing and growing from that. So providing sort of a holistic approach, but the fact that it is part of our DEI strategy means it's something that's not going to fall behind.
Yeah, and that's amazing that that committee's come into place, because I think there's so much, isn't there, that the industry needs to be doing on a holistic kind of basis in terms of diversity and inclusion as a whole, and mental health, as well as race and equality and all the other things that fall under diversity and inclusion and fall under that topic, because obviously diversity and inclusion looks very different to different people. So ensuring that all areas are included in that conversation is really important. That's really great. And Lee, for the HBAA.
Yeah, very similar to Priya. We launched the Diversity, Equality, Inclusion Action Group earlier this year. Well, actually last year it was the Next Gen, and we've kind of evolved it from that. So a term of membership with HBAA is that they agree to the terms of ethics, and within that is our DEI statement. And a part of the DEI statement is the Eventwell manifesto. So it kind of all comes down in terms of everything that's expected, but also from our action group, again, similar to Priya, we have objectives and strategic objectives for us to hit for 2021, including mental health first aiders. We did a survey last week to all of our members, including, what we've been lobbying, what local authorities they're under, what they're seeing in terms of business. But one of the key questions was, do you have mental health first aiders in your business, for us to then work out where we've got potential gaps. We continue to offer training through Eventwell and that collaboration and partnership from a mental health first aid training perspective, but also awareness. And as you said, it needs to be from the top down in terms of awareness of mental health, but how that actually manifests itself into the events industry. So how we approach events, and also from a delegate experience perspective, because I think it was Susan that was saying, we've been sat at our homes for a year. The thought of delegates attending an event, so we get the green light to go back to live, but actually how does it feel in the delegate's shoes? So it's looking at those checklists to make sure that we're preempting anxiety, we're preempting fear, but not just for the employees, but also the people attending our events.
Yeah.
So all of our content, we are injecting DEI into that, because it's important for people to recognize that it's not going to be easy for people just to leave their house and go back to an event, a live event, to get on a train, and that's really important for us. But one thing, again, from a lobbying perspective, and again from HBA, as a result of Rishi's announcement today, you know, one of the things that we have put as part of our reaction is that we want to see specific funds for mental health training from the government, more and more so. And we've been lobbying that for about, I don't know, about 6 months now, but that for me is really prevalent and really key for businesses to be able to absorb funds to help them to train. It shouldn't be the elephant in the room. It should be the forefront, because as people return back to work, all of us are battered and bruised. We're on demand at the moment. I think it was Susan was saying, in terms of, you know, we're constantly in Zoom, we've got Zoom fatigue, but we are on demand as well. And therefore, to help us to, you know, navigate through this, we've got to be in the best conditions of ourselves. So the events that we're working, we're injecting mental health and well-being within it. We've got an event going tomorrow. The break is all about being your best self, and actually bite-sized content helps for us to kind of, you know, adapt a new way of working. So there's a lot going on, very similar to what Priya was saying, and, you know, coming together with Eventwell, with all of us, will help us to have commonality as well, and themes that we are working to for mental health and well-being. So we're not working in silos, we're coming together as an industry as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's really important. Again, it's that stronger together, isn't it? It's that community kind of feel for the industry, which I think is, I think personally as well, is just so important for our industry moving forward, kind of stuff. That's the positive that's come out of the last 12 months, is how it started to unite us and bring us all together. So Susan, with MPI, you've mentioned some of the fantastic things that MPI are doing, but, you know, just to touch on again that kind of mental health and well-being aspect, but also as well kind of drawing in that element and focus on life skills and stuff, which is also really important for mental health and well-being.
Yeah, definitely. And we've been trying to model best practice, really, and model good behaviours we've actually set up a board buddy system, whereby members of the board actually have taken a cohort of our membership, and they're our buddies. So we phone them up and keep in touch. And I should say that it sounds great in practice. In theory, it's been quite difficult, as people have gone on to furlough and some people have disengaged, but we're persevering and we're keeping in touch with people, because it's really about really listening and being responsive to our members' needs. Rather than sort of assuming that we know what they might want. And I think, like Lee and Priya have both said, it's about, you know, really putting on content and delivering things that our members actually need for them right now at the time. So we've actually been communicating with our members and getting views from them about what they want to see for the content at our European conference that will be held virtually, unfortunately, later in the year. And we've got several online forums for members to chat. So being a global association, we've got our MPI global forums, and we ourselves are trying to connect more with our European chapter colleagues and our North American colleagues to really exploit those opportunities that we have available to us, so that our community can feel part of a community. They can feel that they're being heard, and they've got a real sense of place in which they can talk by setting up the forums like our community that I mentioned before. And I think I just want to finish from my part for MPI, of course, and like other people on the panel will be too. I think it would be remiss not to mention the One Industry, One Voice campaign that we're all supporting as well, which is having a collective of people whereby we've got a one voice to talk about what's happening in the industry, to talk about what's going on, to make sure that our efforts that we're putting in as individual associations aren't being diluted, so we can really all come together and join forces to have one voice in the industry that's loud and strong.
Absolutely, and so needed as well. And it's been wonderful. It's been amazing to see that come about over the last 12 months, because it's been desperately needed by an awful lot of people in our industry, hasn't it, to be able to see us coming together and just that sense of unity. I remember standing on Millennium Bridge back in lockdown last year with a red t-shirt on, holding on a red light to make the government stand up and take notice of us more than anything else. So I think it's given people a tremendous sense of community and oneness, which is the really wonderful thing about it. So if anybody's got any questions, put them into the Q&A. We've got another kind of 15 or so minutes to go. So do pop your questions in for Priya, Lee and Susan, and I'll direct those. One question that I wanted to ask you guys. So it's budget day today. We've had the go ahead, roadmap recovery. Is that the name that's been given to it? Roadmap recovery kind of stuff. We've been given that June kind of start date. And without us getting too excited about it in case things happen, kind of from a support perspective from each of the associations, I mean, what can members come to you guys, and prospective new members as well? What does that roadmap recovery kind of route look like for your associations and stuff? Priya, I'll start with you again this time.
First, I'd just like to on Susan's note about one industry, one voice, and having that voice in the industry. When the roadmap, or whatever we decide to call it, was announced, the fact that events as an industry was recognized, was mentioned and recognized, I think as an industry was a massive leap for us as a whole. So, you know, our voice is finally being heard, which in itself was like, you know, finally, and it was really nice to hear. As an association, we have a smaller working group with some of our members that are working on a back to live project, and that's what we've called it. And it's basically working on guidelines from our members' point of view in what they would need to be doing when we get back into that sort of in-person environment. So things like checklists for your venues, your health and safety checklists, and things like that. So it becomes a working document and something that can be shared with all our members. And I think, you know, that's going to be something that grows. And this was something that was started, I think, last summer. And obviously with the new announcements, it's something that it's going to be revisited and looking how it evolves, because it will be a continuing evolvement, where we're still going to have the virtual element, and knowing how to work in that hybrid environment as well, like, you know, creating experiences that are of extreme value for both your in-person attendees and your online attendees, and that's something that has been really useful within our association for people to actually work on that. And I think it because it comes from our members, it's probably more credible than if, like, for example, as an association, I was like, oh, well, this is what I've heard from so and so, and this is what you should do. The fact that it is from our members, it's things that they are actually working on, and guidelines that would be useful specifically to what they do in their day-to-day.
Yeah, it's that power of peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, isn't it? Kind of stuff, that credibility, that relatability.
That all relates back to your, you know, the learning and development side of things as well. You know, we have been in this pandemic for, you know, coming up a year now, and a year is still not long enough for us to say this. We know what we're doing. It's all still learning. We're all, you know, we're at a process where things are continuously changing. You know, and we're having to sort of learn along the way as we go along. So, you know, no one, I personally, I think we can't say we're experts in online events, because we're still learning how we're doing that. So, you know, that personal development aspect is absolutely key.
Yeah, absolutely. But I always question as well, is anybody really an expert?
Yeah.
Nobody knows everything, do they? So we're constantly learning, aren't we? Which is really beneficial for mental health and well-being as well. That allow yourself to know that you don't know everything. You know, everybody you know knows something you don't. So that was a very wise thing that my parents said to me when I was younger. Everybody you meet knows something you don't know. So it's, you know, allow yourself to learn and kind of grow and develop. I think it's a massive opportunity, ladies, wouldn't you agree, for us as an industry to kind of, you know, not just that rise strong. I kind of referring to it almost like the phoenix out of the flames. And so, because there's lots of hindsight in terms of if we'd embraced digital solutions a little bit sooner, rather than debating it for 10 years, rather than talking about it for 10 years, if we'd just started doing things a little bit sooner, would the last 12 months have been as difficult? Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lee. So for HBAA and HBAA's kind of roadmap, kind of what's that looking like?
So we've got an event tomorrow called Let's Talk Business and Recovery in Partnership, which is one of a series. So what we're looking at there is forming bite-sized content to help members to think outside of the pandemic and the recovery. So tomorrow we've got, for example, bright space events with similar to what Priya was saying in terms of COVID secure training. So when we're returning to live, but also to transfer into a virtual, and that also covers mental health, which I know that you are part of that training. We've also got people by people, which is looking at personal brands for people to actually look at themselves and how they come across social media channels, so helping them individually, looking at kind of what data insights can help us to make informed decisions as well as we move forward. And then also looking at, we've got networking through virtual. So this series will help us to shape the future for our members. So looking at virtual events, looking at content, looking at engagement, looking at personal development, and looking at ourselves from an inside looking out and from an outside looking in, because we're going to need that moving forward. We're going to need that resilience and that support. So the series will help us to shape the content for the future, but also to provide the guidelines using expertise and knowledge, but also members feeding into that to help us with their recovery. As people talk about build back better or bounce back better, we very much think about it's being build back balanced, and how can we help ourselves to come out of that.
Like that. I like that a lot. I really like that. Yeah, that's so much better. I like it a lot.
I think so.
Yes, it's got a much better, that whole balance kind of.
Well, it has. I mean, the pendulum swing's gone massively one way, hasn't it? We're all sat at home now, but what we don't know whether it's going to go massively the other way, but we have to control that pendulum swing and really control the speed of that, because when you talk to people before this, they were saying, I'm away from home 3 nights a week, I'm burnt out, I'm tired. Now it's the other way, that people are on demand, and yes, they're tired, but actually, are we going to bounce back to where it was? Yeah. Or are we going to control that bounce and actually direct it a little bit differently?
Yeah. So I like that kind of whole thought process around that of bouncing back, but not bouncing back to how we were before, not necessarily bouncing back better, but bouncing back balanced. It's such a completely different mindset in terms of and embracing mental health and well-being, which is exactly what we're talking about. So Susan, from MPI's perspective, in terms of your roadmap, what's that looking like?
I think for us it's very much about learning from what's going on and watching and learning and not being too quick to rush in, as has been said. And I like all these bouncing back.
And a lot of bees there.
All those bees, yeah, we love the bees in Manchester.
We like bees in Manchester, yeah.
What we've been doing is showcasing events, so where things have been actually happening, and the fact that life has been continuing in the event world during this time, and balancing some of the fake news that's out there, as though the whole industry has ground to a halt, by being able to showcase what has been going on. As I mentioned before, showcasing any member events particularly that have been happening. But for example, my day job is actually, I'm with Helms Briscoe, so we're a venue finding company, and in actual fact, this year so far, we've had on average 1 event per day that's been organised by our UK associates. And so, there is a lot of things going on out there. And I think we've taken the responsibility of MPI as an association to share with our members and try and keep that buoyancy going, that, that life hasn't ground to a halt, by again, sort of like showcasing through example and letting people know what's happening out there. And we were also able to be, Priya reminded me when she mentioned back to live, there's been an event in the Netherlands that the Netherlands chapter of the UKI were heavily involved in, whereby they actually had a live event a couple of weeks ago with 500 people in an event, meeting each other, mingling with each other, you know, hanging out with each other. And I know it's the Netherlands, but, you know, this is coming for us too. And so being able to learn from our European colleagues and see what's happening and learning from best practice, and then being the conduit to share that with our members to keep that hope alive. Yeah,
amazing. And it's amazing to hear that, you know, that it's coming back. But, you know, the future can look very different, can't it, in terms of, I've just penned the phrase in my head that says the future's bright, the future's balanced kind of thing. And it's because I speak from a professional that's worked in the industry for a long time, and I love live. I love what we do. I love face-to-face events. I'm a pure operational nut that gets a buzz. I'm almost like on a high when I walk away from it, kind of stuff. But I also have to appreciate the fact that on the flip side of that, I'm a mum with a young child who's in school, little school as well. She's not going to be at secondary school for another 7-8 years. And I know from a flexibility perspective, the barriers that puts on me to be able to attend a lot of face-to-face events. I don't necessarily want to be away from my daughter for 3 nights.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, and also from an attendance perspective, we need to put more onus, don't we, on attendees and attendees' mental health and well-being. It isn't just about, and I think that's been missed for a very, very long time. Attending an event is very isolating. So we talk about isolation that we've all experienced over the last 12 months. But, you know, people who are traveling to conferences, international conferences, you're on a plane for a few hours, you're staying in a hotel, you're on your own, you're with your work colleagues, but you're on your own in your room. You know, it's and also the attending the events kind of stuff can be quite daunting, yeah, and quite scary for some people, and some people get quite anxious about the whole idea and process of it. So while we've got on our flip side in terms of organizer, our love and passion for the industry, there's the attendee kind of experience as well. So as associations, you've got any educational kind of stuff? Obviously Eventwell, we'll be doing stuff jointly with Eventwell in terms of looking at that from an attendees experience, because that's going to be a big thing as well, isn't it, for the coming years, that anxiety of people attending events again. So have you seen that demand coming in for that kind of educational content to push that out to members in terms of how do organisers address that element in terms of making attendees feel safe, welcome? Has that come up? Have you seen that coming up at all?
I think for us at EMA, it's the safety issue in, you know, how do we ensure that our attendees or our members, event attendees, remain safe, and obviously with that, obviously, like as you mentioned, will come like heightened anxiety, because, you know, the venue would have gone through all the guidelines to make them all set up to be safe. They'd have temperature checks on arrival, but no one's considered the journey to that venue. If you're jumping on a train or whatnot to get to that venue, where does the safety aspect of that start from? So, because we would have had the whole registration process, everything would look great and, you know, all up to speed on you know, what's needed and what's required. But, you know, taking it a step back from that, you know, and as you mentioned, Helen, like the traveling aspect of, you know, being away and being alone and being by yourself, and we've not even touched upon any accessibility issues either, which again is something that I think, especially in this past year, a lot of people have considered a lot more, especially with these online events, and how to make our events more accessible as well.
Yeah, one of the things that when we did the digital summit last year, one of the things that came out of that, and we did a whole session on it, was linguistic isolation as well. How when we're organising events and all of the content is pushed out in English with no translators, and everyone forced to speak and listen and absorb information, because somebody made a very good point. I saw a post on social media this week and somebody made a very good point about it. You're constantly translating in your head, and that can be exhausting for some attendees and stuff as well. So it's more, I think there's an opportunity for us to really start thinking on that complete holistic DEI kind of approach to event management, not just from the organizer's perspective, but from the attendees' perspective as well. Lee and Susan, do you kind of agree with that? Lee, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm just on the same page as that. I think the isolation, as I was saying earlier, you know, to put yourself in somebody else's shoes when we've sat at home for so long, to even for some people, I mean, I stayed away in December, I stayed away in October. When I stayed away in October, it was the first time that I'd been away since March, and I joke you not, I had to dust down my suitcase. But when I open my suitcase, because I have a suitcase where I'm away from work and I replace everything and replenish everything, when I lifted the lid off, I actually was anxious when I lifted the lid. It was like I was opening the chest of something that I didn't know what was in there, because I was lifting the lid back up of the life that I'd so abruptly left behind. I wasn't ready to leave that life behind. I was forced to leave that life behind. And when I opened that case, my mind went straight back to the 4:30 in the morning starts, to getting back at 2 in the morning, missing out on things. And actually, I hadn't missed it, but what I had missed is actually the adrenaline of repacking that case. So I had to come at peace and ease of the fact that that was a time in my life. And I'm not saying I'm not going to go back to that, but at the moment I'm not. And that case is shut and it's out of sight, but it's certainly not out of mind. And that case, when I do start to travel, I will repack it differently. I think there will be things in there that I didn't have before, because I've become accustomed to certain home comforts that I didn't realize that I was missing. And I think that's the big thing for me, is that I need to adapt and embrace for the future by making some small subtle changes to help me to ease myself back in, but also those around me. And I think I'm not alone there.
No, definitely not. And that leads really nicely in. We've gone a little bit over. I wanted to finish this session on the last question. No, I was going to say it's perfect. You've kind of finished it on terms of, this is what I'm going to do personally, kind of moving forward kind of stuff. So Susan, did you want to share what are you going to be doing personally moving forward?
I feel quite moved by what Lee's just said there, because it put me back in mind of my last trip just 2 weeks before the lockdown happened. And I think it's absolutely right. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of other people. You don't know another person until you've walked a mile in their moccasins, old Indian proverb, but it's really true. We really need to be thinking about the needs of our delegates, of our members, of everyone in the industry. And I think moving forward, of everyone who we come into contact with, that same fear factor happens if you've been in your home for a couple of weeks, when you just have to go out to the supermarket, usually amongst others, for the first time in a few weeks. And I'm personally looking forward to our partnership with you, Helen, and with Eventwell, to be able to get stuck into some of this and start to really respond to the needs of our members, and their needs maybe that they don't even realise that they had until now. And we can present them with content and get them equipped to feel safe and secure and embrace the future, whatever it might look like, because it certainly won't look like the one we left behind.
No, definitely not, which is a good thing as well, Susan, isn't it? I think we can all agree with that. There's a bright future and horizon for us out there. Not that it wasn't bright in the first, but there was a lot of things that needed to change, I think, if that makes sense. And pretty lovely to finish on you for these. What things are you kind of embracing and doing moving forward?
So I think for me, like the pandemic gave me time to think about myself and think about what I actually enjoy doing and not. And for me, that was a real benefit of the pandemic. And then I think we don't talk about the good sides of the pandemic as much, because for me, it had quite a few positives. And I think, using that and being able to reach out to our members, because where they probably haven't had as much time, and that reaching out and learning more about what they're going through, and obviously working with you, Helen, and Eventwell, and being able to provide content that matches their requirements, I think will be wonderful.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to be working with all three organisations, HBAA, MPI, UK and Ireland, and EMA over the next months and hopefully years in terms of like designing that and looking at better mental health and wellbeing for the industry, which has always been our aim, to make tangible change to the event industry's relationship with wellbeing. And I know that working with these 3 fantastic associations over the coming time is going to really impact on that. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining us today. Thank you for everybody who joined and has been listening in to the session. If you have got any questions after the session that you think of, then you can always email those over to team@eventworld.org, and we'll make sure we get some answers for those for you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. If you are still free at 5 o'clock, come and join us for a bit of mindfulness, meditation and breath work with Nicole Leader, who's one of our Event Well Fit instructors. She's going to be finishing off the day. And don't forget, it's Event Wellbeing Day today. The theme is Rising Strong, and we're all about taking an hour out of your day to do something for your mental health and wellbeing. So don't forget, there's plenty of time left in the day for you to take an hour out. So make sure you do that, and hopefully we'll see you at 5 o'clock. Thank you very much, ladies. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.